I put the turkey in the oven at 8 in the morning, the same way I had every year since we got married. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a wife. You keep doing the small things, the quiet things, even when something inside you has already made up its mind. My husband didn't notice. He was on his phone at the kitchen counter, scrolling, half laughing at something. He hadn't asked if I needed help. He hadn't asked in a long time. I want to back up because this story doesn't start on Thanksgiving. It starts much earlier than that. Maybe the first time I realized I had built a life around someone who had never once stopped to ask me how I was actually doing. His name is Brandon. We met when I was 26 at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. He was funny and warm, and he looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the room. I fell for that look completely. We dated for a year, got engaged, got married. We moved into a small house 20 minutes from his parents. I thought that was just geography. I didn't understand yet that it was a preview. Brendan has a son from his first marriage. His son's name is Tyler, and Tyler is 8 years old and genuinely the sweetest kid I've ever known. I love that boy. That part was never the problem. The problem was his ex-wife, Stephanie. Stephanie and Brandon had been divorced for 3 years when we met. From the outside, they were what people call co-parenting successfully. Tyler went between houses, there was a shared calendar app, holiday schedules were negotiated in advance. Fine, I understood that. I had no issue with it. What I had an issue with was harder to explain, and for a long time I tried not to explain it even to myself. Stephanie called often, not just about Tyler. She would call to tell Brandon about a problem with her car. She would text him when she was having a bad day at work. She would send him photos not of Tyler, just things she thought he'd find funny, and Brandon would respond, every time, sometimes while we were in the middle of a conversation, sometimes at dinner, once on our anniversary. When I brought it up, he said I was being insecure. His mother said the same thing. His mother said Stephanie was practically family, and that it was important for Tyler to have both parents in harmony. She said that to my face at her dinner table, while I sat there holding a glass of wine and nodding slowly, because what else do you do? His mother is a woman named, well, I've taken to calling her what she is to me, which is my mother-in-law and nothing warmer than that. She is a woman who decided about 6 months into our marriage that I was a tolerated guest in her son's life. She was subtle about it, always subtle, the kind of woman who phrases every criticism as concern. I just worry that you worked so much, honey. Brandon needs someone present. The kind of woman who asks Stephanie for her pie recipe in front of you at Easter. I worked full-time as a hospital administrator. I brought home a good salary. Brandon had been between opportunities for most of our marriage. He had a background in sales and periodically got excited about some new position or some new idea that never fully materialized. He was charming and optimistic and genuinely believed things would come together. I wanted to believe that too, so I paid the mortgage, I paid the utilities, I kept the health insurance that covered all 3 of us, including Tyler, during custody weeks. I tracked the bills in a spreadsheet I kept on my laptop, color-coded by due date. Brandon didn't know the password to our online banking. I realized that 14 months into the marriage, when he asked me what our account number was for something and I had to pull it up for him. He hadn't thought to ask before. It hadn't occurred to him to know. I'm not saying he was a bad person. I want to be fair about that. I think he was someone who had learned, very early, that things would be taken care of by his mother first, and then by Stephanie, and then by me. He moved through life expecting the infrastructure to exist. He just didn't expect to build it. The Thanksgiving thing didn't come out of nowhere, but it felt like it did, the way the last straw always does. It was the Wednesday before. I had already bought the groceries, 2 trips to the store, a full cart each time. I had the menu planned. I was making my grandmother's cornbread stuffing from scratch, which takes the better part of the day. Brandon's parents were coming, and his younger sister and her husband, and I had been mentally organizing the seating and the timing for a week. Brandon came home from his afternoon out. He'd been meeting a friend, and he set his keys on the counter and said, almost as an aside, "Oh, I wanted to mention. I told Stephanie she could come tomorrow." I turned around from the sink. He kept going the way he did when he was hoping momentum would carry something through. Tyler's been asking about it. He wants his mom there. I figured, we all get along, it's not a big deal. He shrugged. My mom's excited, actually. I'm sure she was. I asked him when he had made this decision. He said they'd been texting about it for a few days. I asked why he hadn't mentioned it to me. He said he hadn't thought it would be a big deal. I stood there for a moment. The kitchen smelled like thyme and brown butter. I had been in that kitchen since 6 that morning. I had a grocery list with 47 items on it that I had purchased with my money and my time, and my husband had decided, without asking me, to invite his ex-wife to the holiday I had been planning for a month. I didn't raise my voice. I had stopped raising my voice a while before that. Something had shifted in me, some quiet sealing over, and I had learned that volume didn't do anything except make me look like the problem. I said, "Okay." He seemed relieved. He went to the living room and turned on the TV. I went back to the sink and stood there with my hands in the water for a long time. Here is what Brandon didn't know, and what I hadn't told anyone. I had spoken to a lawyer 6 weeks earlier. I had started the process. The papers had been filed 10 days before Thanksgiving, and I was waiting quietly, carefully, for the right moment to move forward. I had not made this decision suddenly. I had made it over the course of about 8 months, in small increments. The way you come to understand something you didn't want to understand. The texts with Stephanie. The checking account I didn't control alone. The birthday dinner his mother planned for him, where I wasn't consulted on the guest list, and showed up to find Stephanie already seated at the table, laughing at something his mother had said. I had made it the night he forgot to pick Tyler up from soccer practice, because he'd gotten caught up watching a game, and I had driven 40 minutes each way in the rain because Tyler couldn't just sit there on the curb, and when I got home, Brandon said, "Thanks, babe," and went back to the couch. I had made it sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage at 11 p.m., too tired to drive home yet, tallying in my head what I contributed versus what I received and not being able to make the math work, no matter how generously I calculated. I made it. And then I waited, because I wanted to do it right. Thanksgiving morning was, on the surface, ordinary. I got up early. I started the turkey. I made the cornbread batter. Brandon slept until 9, came downstairs in his sweatshirt, poured coffee, and sat at the counter on his phone. His parents arrived at noon. His sister and her husband arrived at 12:30. Stephanie arrived at 1. She came through the front door like she knew where everything was. Which she did, actually, because she had been to that house before. The house Brandon had owned before we got married. The house I had since repainted and refurnished and maintained entirely on my own income. She hugged my mother-in-law first, then Brandon, then Tyler, who lit up the way kids do when they see their mom. And that part I genuinely wasn't angry about. She said hi to me at some point. I said hi back. I was carrying a casserole dish and didn't stop moving. We sat down to eat at 2 o'clock. My mother-in-law had set the table, her house rules, even in someone else's house, and she had seated Stephanie across from Brandon. I was at the far end, next to his sister's husband, who I liked fine but who I didn't know well. His mother said grace. She thanked God for family, for healing, for second chances. I looked at my plate. Somewhere around the sweet potatoes, Stephanie and Brandon started talking about Tyler's spring baseball league. Then they were laughing about something, some memory, some inside thing. And the table leaned in, and his mother was smiling, and I sat at the far end with my fork in my hand and understood, with a clarity that felt almost peaceful, that this was not going to get better. It was not going to get better because no one at that table, except maybe Tyler, who was 8 and just wanted his green beans, saw anything wrong with this picture. To them, this was fine. This was family. This was harmony. I was the extra person. I had paid for the food on this table, and I was the extra person at it. I excused myself to get more rolls from the kitchen. I took longer than necessary. I stood at the counter and breathed slowly and looked out the window at the backyard where the leaves had all come down and the grass was going brown, and I thought, this is the last Thanksgiving I will spend feeling like a guest in my own house. I went back to the table. I sat down. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. I had put them there that morning, deliberately, the way you put your keys somewhere you'll remember them. And I took out the envelope. It was a standard white envelope, letter-sized, a little bent at one corner from being in my pocket all day. I set it on the table in front of Brandon's plate. He looked at it, then at me. "What's this?" "You should open it," I said. He picked it up the way you pick up something you think might be a card. He slid his thumb under the flap. He pulled out the papers. His face changed. Not all at once. It was more like a slow draining. The color left first, starting at his jaw. Then he was very still. "What?" He stopped. He looked at me again. "I filed 6 weeks ago," I said. "I've been waiting for the right time." The table was quiet. His mother had set down her fork. His sister was looking at her plate. Stephanie, to her credit, said nothing and looked at the wall. Tyler didn't fully understand what was happening. He asked if he could have more stuffing, and I passed him the dish, and he took some, and that was the most normal thing that happened in that room for the rest of the meal. Brandon said, "We can talk about this." I said, "We can." My nephew stood in my living room and told me the bank was cow-snapping closed. His mother started to say something. Something about not making a scene, something about family, something that I could feel coming from across the table like a cold wind. I looked at her, just looked at her for a moment, and something in my expression must have been very clear because she stopped. I folded my napkin. I set it beside my plate. I pushed my chair back. I thanked everyone for coming. I meant it for his sister and her husband. I told Tyler I would see him soon, and I meant that too. I got my coat from the hook by the door and I picked up my bag from the hallway, which I had also packed that morning. 3 days of things, just what I needed, and I walked out. It was 38 degrees outside. I could see my breath. I sat in my car for a few minutes before I started the engine. Not because I was second-guessing anything. More like I needed to let the moment finish being what it was. The house behind me had gone quiet, no voices carrying through the windows. No movement by the door, just the particular stillness of a situation that has been set in motion and can't be called back. I had a reservation at a hotel 30 minutes away. I had made it 2 weeks prior. I had a bag, a plan, a lawyer, a future I had been quietly constructing while my husband sat on the couch. I had done this right. That mattered to me. I started the engine. I want to say something about that drive because it wasn't what I expected. I had assumed I would cry. I had cried plenty in the months leading up to that moment. In my car, in the parking garage, in the shower, once very quietly in the bathroom at work with the fan on. But driving away that afternoon, I didn't cry. I put on the radio, a song I liked came on, and I turned it up. There is something about finally doing the thing you were afraid to do. The fear does not go away in advance. It goes away the moment after. In the weeks that followed, I learned a few things. I learned that his mother called me twice, both times to ask if I was really sure about this. I let it go to voicemail both times. I did not call back. I did not feel guilty about that in the way I once would have. I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, and I'm Robertson giving that she didn't think it was appropriate for her to come to our family dinner, that it was awkward, that he should ask me first. He had asked me first. He had asked her to come anyway and told her I was fine with it. That piece of information sat with me for a while. I wasn't sure exactly what to do with it, but I filed it. I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, and the finances, the household, the insurance, the appointments, the repairs, and the general infrastructure of a life, leaving that life is logistically easier than you think. I already knew where everything was. I already knew what things cost. I already knew how to do all of it alone, because I had been doing most of it alone. I got an apartment on the 3rd floor of a building downtown. It has big windows and a parking space that's actually mine. I can see a piece of the river from the corner of the bedroom window if I stand at the right angle. I still see Tyler. Brandon and I worked out an arrangement where I stay involved in his life to the degree that Tyler wants, and Tyler wants, which is the part that matters. He texts me sometimes. Last month he sent me a photo of a lizard he found on the playground and said it was very rare. I told him it absolutely was. I don't think about Brandon much now, not with bitterness anyway. I think about him the way you think about a door that was the wrong size for the frame. Not badly made, maybe, just not right for where it was supposed to go. I think about myself at 26. sitting across from him at that birthday dinner, watching him be charming and warm, feeling so certain I had found something. I don't blame her. She was doing the best she could with what she knew. What I know now is that I should have paid attention to how a man treats the infrastructure of his life. Whether he knows what things cost, who handles them, how they get done. Whether he sees that at all. I know what my account balance is. I know when my rent is due, what my health plan covers, where my important documents are, and what I want the next 5 years to look like. I know that I can sit at a table where I'm an afterthought, and I can also stand up from it. That was enough. It turned out to be more than enough. The hotel that first night had a restaurant attached, and I ordered dinner by myself at a table near the window. Soup, a glass of wine, a piece of bread. I ate slowly. There was no one to check in with. The evening was entirely my own. It was the best Thanksgiving dinner I'd had in years. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that Thanksgiving. Not in a mystical way, just the plain, observable kind. The kind where you watch a pattern repeat long enough and finally understand that patterns don't break themselves. Brandon didn't wake up one day and decide to disregard me. It happened in small steps, each one barely noticeable on its own. He didn't ask if I minded Stephanie texting him at dinner. He didn't think to learn the account password. He didn't check with me before extending an invitation to his ex-wife for a holiday I had spent weeks preparing. Each of those things, individually, could be explained away. Together, they told a story. And the story was that he had never once had to consider the cost of anything, not financially, not emotionally, because someone had always absorbed it for him. First his mother, then Stephanie, then me. That's not a character flaw in the dramatic sense. It's more like a gap, a place where a certain kind of awareness never developed because it was never required. And here is what I had to come to terms with. I helped build that gap by continuing to fill it. Every time I paid the bill without mentioning it, every time I drove 40 minutes in the rain without making him understand what that meant, every time I swallowed the thing I wanted to say because I didn't want to seem difficult, I was teaching him that everything would be fine regardless, that there were no real consequences, that I would stay. The envelope changed that. Not because it was dramatic, though I understand it looked that way from the outside, but because it was the first time I let the truth of what I had decided reach the surface. I had been carrying that decision for months, quietly, carefully, making sure I was doing it right. That's the part that mattered to me, not the moment at the table, but the 8 months before it, the lawyer's appointment, the spreadsheet I kept of shared assets, the hotel reservation I made 2 weeks in advance. That was the real act of courage. The table was just where it became visible. I think about Tyler sometimes and what I hope he takes from this, even though he's 8 and won't understand it for years. I hope he sees that the women in his life, all of them, including his mother, including me, are people who carry real weight. That the bills don't pay themselves, that dinner doesn't appear, that behind every smooth-running household is someone who figured out the logistics and showed up anyway. I hope he grows into a man who notices that, who asks, who knows the password. For myself, I learned that intelligence without courage is just information you never act on. I knew for a long time that something was wrong. I could see it clearly, but knowing and deciding are different things, and deciding costs something. It cost me a marriage, a house I had repainted wall by wall, a version of a future I had believed in. What I got back was everything I had quietly handed over, my time, my money, my sense of what I deserved. The apartment with the big windows is mine. The parking space is mine. The river, I can see from the corner of the bedroom, if I stand at the right angle. That's mine too. That soup I ate alone at the hotel restaurant on Thanksgiving night was the first meal I had enjoyed in longer than I want to admit. No one needed anything from me. The evening was entirely my own. That feeling, that particular quiet fullness, is what I had been working toward without knowing it. Not revenge, not vindication, just the ordinary dignity of a life that fits.